Welcome to Bay Area Psychology. The need to attach to a primary figure is a basic drive, not only in humans, but in other species as well. Karl Malmquist suggests that when attachment bonds are disrupted, all individuals respond to these disruptions in 4 stages: numbness, protest, despair, and finally detachment. In fact, in the face of early emotional abandonment, our survival instincts may lead us to deactivate our own attachment behavior and lead us to feel aloof or numb. Many people decide at a very early stage to never be vulnerable again. We are fortunate to have May Wolf with us to discuss the legacy of emotional abandonment. Welcome. May, you are a licensed clinical social worker, and I believe you practice both in Capitola and Los Gatos.
Right.
Okay. Appreciate you taking time out to be with us tonight. Well, in terms of emotional abandonment, this is apparently a specialty of yours that you've been working with for a number of years. And I'm wondering what drew you to this particular focus in your practice?
Well, it has kind of found me.
Okay.
And I think I grew up being emotionally abandoned. And the trick of, I think, that makes emotional abandonment different than physical or sexual abandonment is there's no scars visible. Okay. And emotional abandonment is sort of like a slow water torture. Drip, drip, drip. Doesn't seem like very much at the time, but then over time, and you carry it with you forever.
Okay. So we can then feel kind of the cumulative effects.
Right.
And by the time someone gets to you, there has probably been experiences in their life as a result of that early abandonment.
The bucket usually is full.
Okay.
And the difficulty with it is so often we just start out just one drip, and we say, well, one drip, what's the big thing about one drip? But as those drips mount up and the bucket gets full, it's almost crazy making because we can't necessarily link up one thing that did it.
Okay.
What's happened is there's been many things that have done it.
Okay. Let's take a look at our first graphic where we can look at some of the emotional consequences of this experience. This is from a book called After the Tears by Jane Middleton Moss and Lori Dwinell. They experience chronic feelings of emptiness, emotional hunger, yearning, a restlessness as if searching for something, apathy, anger, detachment, despair, and feeling discarded, worthless, or unlovable. So if we take a look at the first few there, talking about chronic feelings of emptiness and emotional hunger, one of the points made in their book is that as adults, we may have this sense that something's not quite right, but like you're saying, because there's no specific event to pin it on, there's kind of a vague
there's a nebulousness to it.
Yeah.
There's a nebulousness. And it is sort of like that free-floating, like anxiety. If we're scared of something, we can then do something that will protect us against that something. If we're afraid of the dark, we can carry a flashlight. If we're just afraid, but we don't know what it is, it's then hard to arm ourselves to protect ourselves. And the same is true emotionally.
Okay. So when someone says they're expressing feelings of emptiness or emotional hunger, how does that show up in their relationships?
I think oftentimes it shows up in terms of looking for someone to come along and make them feel better. Okay. And not being able to generate self-worth from inside of themselves. So continually looking outside, trying to fix somebody, make them indebted to them somehow, so then they'll be whole.
Okay, so part of that, if I can become indispensable to you, you will value me enough to stay with me.
And I'm lovable. And
then I become lovable. So that becomes very, very much based on my behavior then towards you. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And if I can make you do something, then I'll be okay. And what we all know is we can't usually make anyone do anything, especially if they don't want to do it. And so it's a setup for more emptiness.
Okay. Yeah, because ultimately we may fail, and then we're sort of left holding the bag. Now they talk about this yearning and this restlessness of searching for something. Now, part of when I opened, I talked about kind of that series that feelings that happens when we reach for maybe an early caretaker who's not there, a sense of protest, and ultimately a sense of despair and numbness and detachment, kind of that thing that we walk through. Do people who come to see you identify with those particular stages of in current relationships, of that attempt to try to force a connection, and how it feels when that person isn't there for them?
I think people come with various senses of disappointment. And sometimes they're sad and disappointed because they're disappointed. And sometimes they're angry and resentful. And that resentment sort of eats at them. And the unfortunate thing is the cycle of it all. How they keep, instead of stopping and looking inside, they keep trying harder to make the outside work. And such is the legacy of it all.
So part of that legacy is, if I say the right thing, if I do the right thing, I can make this happen. I can make you love me.
Somehow, yeah. And I think Claudia Black makes a good distinction between loss and an abandonment. Loss, we all have losses in our life. I mean, we can't live and not have some kind of loss. And we need those kinds of losses, some losses, so we can separate and go on our own way. Abandonment is when those losses happen and we're not emotionally supported through them. So it builds a whole sort of crazy-making, you know, I think this or I feel this. No, you don't. And so we get into the denial of our own feelings, and what we feel is not correct. Therefore, we're not correct. We're not right. We're not lovable. So
it becomes kind of a lack of reality in a way. Sort of how to, you know.
It's a woundedness.
A woundedness.
Yeah, it's a woundedness.
They also talked about apathy, anger, detachment. In terms of apathy, I imagine that would show up in relationships as a sort of, I could take people or leave them, you know, they can come and go, whatever.
No matter what I do, nothing is good enough, so I won't do anything.
Sort of like that failed perfectionist sort of thing. If everything has to be perfect, then why try? I
can never make it. But I'm going to, you know, on one hand, why try, and I can't let go of it either. So it's a real bind people get into.
What kind of partners do people choose who have experienced early emotional abandonment? Have you ever seen a pattern develop in your work?
Either they pick people they can fix and try real hard, or they pick people who they think will fix them. You know, I saw him, it was wonderful, he had it all together, he looked great. And then, you know, 6 months into the relationship, you find out, you know, he's got the secret life. And you don't see things. I think what happens is we get blinded because of our own hurt. And those things that we don't look into because they're too painful create blind spots, so we don't see them in other people. And so we fall into the same holes.
So then we may, there may in fact be clues in the relationship that the connection is not as strong as I think it is, but I am not going to want to look at it. And I think people connect in terms of woundedness. You know, men connect with women who they want to somehow make better. I mean, it starts out very kind, and men, you know, and women can connect with men who are just poor little boys who have had an awful upbringing, and they're going to show them and love them enough, love them into self-worth. I don't think anyone can love another person into their self-worth. In fact, I've actually had clients say that to me in my practice, where they'll be describing a man that they're with and say, she'll say, well, you know, I just think if I could love him enough, you know, if I just stand by him and stick it out, you know, that somehow I'll be able to make it work out. I think we do that with, you know, spouses, and we also do that with children. And it gets into trying to control somebody else's life so we can feel better. That's negative control. And of course it doesn't work because the other person rebels. And then we try harder, and it, you know, the cycle of it all goes on. Well, and in fact, on the outside, it can almost have a grandiose feel, because it's sort of like, because I want to be that invaluable to you, I'm going to want to intrude in many different aspects of your life. And it's sort of like I'm not willing to hear no. Like, I don't do no. So if you don't want my help, it's because I'm not asking correctly, or I'm not framing it right. So there's that attempt to kind of go around and over and above to try to
again, I think what starts out as good intentions, like it's important to have some drive in one's life. It helps us get through, and that's sort of the seduction of it all. But then it comes a point of diminishing returns, where the roof is falling in our head and we're still trying.
Yeah.
And then we get depressed, then we get resentful. We end up in awful relationships. We don't look to ourselves.
Okay.
I think, too, what I find a lot is people's perception of their own importance, not having that in some kind of perspective, either thinking that they are more important than they are, or not important enough, and not having some kind of moderation in that.
Okay, so maybe not really recognizing how much influence they do have in the relationship on either end.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, it ties into what you were saying in terms of apathy. You know, no matter what I do, it'll still be the same. Yeah. And then, but I don't dare, let them go out because they won't know what to do. And so we can really torture ourselves and continue feeling worthless. We keep it going. We keep going what got started a long time ago.
Yeah, it's sort of that replaying, and I know Harville Hendricks had talked about, we have a tendency to replay our early wounds until we get it right.
Right.
And so we just find on the cast of characters that seems to work.
We pick real challenges.
Yeah,
yeah.
We do.
Yeah.
We're nothing if not tenacious.
Right.
We're going to take a quick break, May. Do stay with us. When we return, we will address paths to healing. Can you tell me what you think the legacy of emotional abandonment in childhood has been for you?
Well, I think the legacy, I think it's been really severe for me in a lot of ways. And I recall feeling emotionally abandoned as a very, very, very small child. And so what that's done to me, the result of that in adulthood has been that I really have this huge empty place deep inside that for years I filled it up with drugs and alcohol, but I know that it's directly connected to feeling emotionally abandoned when I was a child. And so what I've been able to do, I've gotten a lot of help in being able to fill up that place with love and friends and that kind of thing. So today it's not so